just making yourself comfortable. There's always upright stance. Just a few moments in this before we sit back. So get your feet in position. Find a good point on the chair where you feel that you're properly supported. Remember, if you need support for your back, then go back a bit, and you'll find just the lower part of your back is against the chair, which in most instances will suffice. Just take a couple of slow, gentle breaths. And then push your feet out a little. Use that angling of the legs to allow you to just sit right back. The weight of your body pressing down through whichever part of your back is against the chair, and then hips and buttocks, lower back. A little bit of weight probably in your heels. Just sort of sinking back into the chair a little bit. Now, when you bring your feet in, you'll probably quite naturally want to come forwards. Once again, coming into position from the side. That's the sort of position that you're looking for. Slightly angled forwards to bring your head more to the middle of this square. When you imagine the square with your feet, your hips at the corners. You don't want to be right back here, because obviously this way I'm tending to fall backwards. So as much as possible, imagine that you're sitting on a stool rather than a chair with a back. Obviously, sit back and rest whenever you need to. About a third of your weight in your feet. And if you can't feel that, it may be because you're a long way back in the chair, which makes it more difficult. But if you need that for the back, then keep that. But what you can do, if you just raise your heels up, that gives you a sort of sense of the balls of your feet being pushed in to the floor. And then just slowly lower your heels and try and keep some of that feeling of your feet, particularly the front half of your feet, being pushed in to the floor. Feel this sort of support structure, or this denser feeling starting in your feet, coming up through your legs, into your back, particularly the middle of your back, at the front of your body. Hang from that, so rib cage hanging down, head nicely poised on top of this central column. And then slowly turning your head. Just have a sense for how far you can move without straining, without pushing against your own body. And as you turn your head, this will happen in all movements one way or another. But if you've ever been on a trampoline or a bouncy castle, you sort of drop down, your descent slows. Or if it's a bouncy castle, you lean into the walls. You start off quite fast, but it slows down and it almost stops, and then it pushes you back. And in the same way, we go through the middle and slows down. And then before you have to sort of force the movement, you just let yourself be drawn back. And then hands in front of the shoulders. And going forwards. Hands down by the sides. Intent is always to encourage smooth movement through the lines of least resistance. That may vary from week to week or day to day, depending on just what's happening within your body. So the exercises are the same from the outside, but can vary a little inside. And just letting your body find that route in the same way that water finds a route downhill. And then winding around. So we have the imagery associated with the movement. We have things like an awareness of that feeling in our shoulders, for instance, and upper back, that we don't want them to stiffen up. And those are the things to keep in mind as you go through the different exercises. Once you're familiar with the sequence, with the set of exercises and the patterns, and then back the other way. Nothing is forced on the body. Rest your hands. Ease and forwards, just feeling the movement in your hips and your pelvis. As you go forward, there'll be a gentle lengthening through your lower back. The hips are sinking back. Use the combination of pushing down through your feet and a slight pull from your hips to bring you back to the upright position without straining. Feel the nice fluid quality of movement in your back and your spine. Turning a little. And then in the other direction. And then circling and just, again, feel what's happening in hips, pelvis, and the pelvic floor. It's a very subtle movement for an area that can often lose that ability for subtle movement, fine motor movement. And it's a function of not just the muscles themselves, but also the various kind of nerve aspects of the nervous system that are involved in all of these. And that makes this a really useful exercise because just there's a fair amount of control involved in this, and it's an area where we can easily lose function as we grow older. Back the other way. And then come back to the central position, straining in your back, just stepping out and back. And on the other side. Hands down to your sides. Turn the palms forwards. Roll forwards again, rotating your arms as you do. Just feeling the very quiet, very subtle movement in the chest and your upper back, as well as the movement of your weight. Try not to go too quickly. There's a moment of just sort of settling and resting. Each time we transfer the weight, you go forwards, just let your feet settle again. Go back to your hips settling. Don't be in a hurry to move forwards or backwards. And then fisherman cast a net. And then coming over as though you're rolling the ball in towards your chest. Feel as you come back and your arms are drawn over, that opening up, that expansion in the front of your body. See if you can just register in the back of your mind still that movement in your hips and your pelvis. This time, as your hands come up, turn them palm in and just draw your elbows apart. Pigeon spreads its wings. And then change into pushing away, hands coming in front of your hips, elbows going out just a little. Sort of very slight, subtle opening and closing in your chest and your upper back. And then hands twisted. You don't come back that far. You want your elbows to go right behind. So the movement backwards is sort of absorbed into this spiraling movement of the arms. And again, feel a bit of opening in the chest as you come back. So then back to pigeon spreads its wings, the little series of 3. So they all involve this opening and closing feeling in chest and upper back to one degree or another. They all involve the weight moving. But there are obviously significant differences by the time that movement is being given a shape by our arms. One more round of this. Turning your hands out. Winding back. And then push forwards. Again, trying to be particular about details. Bring your hands around, your weights in, back in your hips mostly. The heel of your palm, your wrist settle, and then you go forwards. As you settle into the front foot, hands go out a little bit, and then the weight goes back. Start all over again. Last one. Coming back here. Turn your hands palm down and polishing the table, using those circular movements in hips and pelvis. Just feeling the movement extending up through into your spine, and spine from your shoulders down through your arms into your fingers. Do one more to each side. So when you get back to the center this time, just turn your hands palm up, press down through your feet and your hips, pushing up and contracting down. One more. Change into the wild goose, that same expansion and contraction in your body. Driving the arms, moving the arms for you. So all you really want to do, the main task of the muscles around your arms and hands and fingers, is to create a shape for that movement to flow through. And then parting the clouds. Just be aware of your back as you push up. You don't want to stiffen up in your upper back or your neck. Remember that feeling of being, when you get close to the rebound on the trampoline or something like that. And as you get closer to this, just allow your body to slow down and to eventually just reverse movement, reverse direction. Now, let your hands drop down, feel the weight of your arms hanging from your shoulders, and dragon plucks the stars from the sky. Now the expansion and contraction is all on that one side. Here your arm hangs, you let your attention shift to the opposite side. Same thing. Once more. And then push in two directions. The two directions, the first is up, and then back. And then pressing out, and back. This time add in the turn. So when you turn, make sure to keep that nice open feeling in your back. Don't twist your shoulders around or twist in the middle of your back, but push out, turn in your hips and your waist, and just let the arms gently follow that movement, and then back. You will get a certain amount of expansion and increase in the range of the movement as it travels up your body, but you don't need to make that happen. Just make sure that your structure's there, your posture's there, the intent is there. Follow the movement. You'll find that it's just a natural, organic process. So this is, I suppose, an area where Tai Chi does take a different approach to many other forms of movement. We're not trying to force the body into a position that doesn't feel right to it. We're following always the natural structures, the natural patterns of movements available to the body. Even though we're sort of trying to break habits of patterns of movements, the things that we replace them with aren't somehow imposed on the body. It's almost like we discover them in the process of letting go of the old habits. Good, and then one foot out, scooping the sea, looking at the sky. The knee is slightly bent still. So although you do get, it's as close as we come really to getting a stretch in the calves and the hamstrings and the lower back, it's not a full stretch in the way that we might do if we were stretching properly or doing something like yoga. You should feel as though you could have gone a little bit further. That's because the focus of attention is on movement. We're not going into a stretch and staying there. We're moving into a position and then back to a second position and then forwards again to the first position. To generate that internal movement, that internal flow. And then your hands fisted. And switch sides. Scooping the sea and looking at the sky. And then again, your hands fisted, sit back. Grasping the tiger's ears. So some of these movements are quite tricky to keep that sense of if you like, a natural movement. And just again, a lot of your intent needs to be focused on those individual qualities in Tai Chi, your weight sinking down, the shoulders nice and soft, whole body moving, your weight moving, and so on and so forth. You want all of these things in place to enable you to do what's really quite a tricky movement to keep smooth, is grasping the tiger's ears. Now, bring your feet back parallel. It's maybe a new one to some of you, or you may not have done it for a while. Just fold your hands over your chest. It's a good one for chest and upper back, this, but really make sure that your weight is sinking down. Don't stiffen up because it can be quite strong. Your left hand, just push out to the side, draw back with the right hand as though you're drawing a bow and arrow. You can either have the elbow out to the side, or as I tend to do, to tuck it behind. And then swing, circle the left hand across as far as you can without pulling the shoulder out of line. Bring your hands back, bring the right hand up inside the left. And do the same thing on the other side. Draw the bow and then release it. It's an exercise called the archer, obvious reasons. And then push out. This time, turn your head, watch the hand as it goes away and around and comes back, so that your eyes become part of the whole exercise, changing focus. So onto your body, the chest expanding and contracting. As it contracts, feel the expansion across your shoulders at the back, and then the contraction. One more time. And then let your hands drop down. Raise your right hand. Let it rotate until it's just a little bit above and to the side of your head. Turn the left hand palm down and out till it's just outside your hip. Turn the hands together, feel your body contracting inwards towards your belly and then expanding outwards on the other side. This is called stretching between heaven and earth. So the hands face each other, they slide past each other, not quite touching. Now from the other side. This is taken from the same set of movements as the previous one, the archer. And then with this one, you can add a movement with your legs in. So to begin with, as you push out, raise your opposite heel, the heel opposite to the hand that's in the air. Let the foot go down. So it's going to be your right hand going up, so your left heel. Push the heel up, and then if it's comfortable, just raise the foot off the ground. So now, as you push your right hand up, want your weight to go across into your right leg a little bit. The right side of your body, raising the left. If you find that a strain on your back or your hips, then just raise the heel. Again, even doing that, you'll get that slight shift across. And again, it's a very subtle movement in the pelvis and the pelvic floor. And then just lower down and rest. Good. Rubbing your hands together. And then tapping over your face. And then your head and neck. Use palms of your hands here. Down to one shoulder. Quite strong on the shoulders. And then your arms. If you've been outside in the wind, you've probably been hunching your shoulders up on the side, so they may well be a bit tight. This is quite a good exercise for helping that. And then upper part of the chest. Right on your belly. And then stronger on your legs, hands fisted or palms of your hands, whichever's easier for you, more comfortable for you, but just really working on the muscles of your legs to get them, the blood flowing so you get the feeling back into them before we stand. And then again, pushing one knee up, like you did before, but just concentrating on that, feeling the effect on muscles of your legs again. And then making a circle with your knee. So now you feel the movement back in your hip. On the other side. Up and down first of all. and then around. And then standing. So as always, use a chair for support. If you've got a wall behind you or a table next to you, as you do, I'm going to move the chair out the way so I can show things more easily. Feet below your hips. And this time, the basic stance, you do angle forward slightly again, but the angling is a pivoting from your ankles. And that brings your weight into the front half of the feet. Any further than this, and you'll fall forwards, still can get uncomfortable. So then you let your hips drop back, and now you come more to the upright stance. This is the equivalent of the sitting posture. Both of them are about really aligning yourself with the pull of gravity and getting that feeling of your center of gravity dropping, rooting down. And let your hips drop back a little bit more and pushing up. An expansion in your belly. I need to step back a bit. And then from here, going into the wild goose for an expansion in your belly, up into the solar plexus. And then down again. And then for parting the crowd, belly, solar plexus, and up towards the top part of your chest, up into your head and your fingers, and then down. So the movement goes up your body in stages. It's a bit like watching the tide come in on the beach. The waves move up and then recede, and then move up a little bit further and recede. So they sort of creep up the beach. And in the same way, we start to feel this opening up, gradually and gently moving up through our body. And as it does, the movements become bigger. Here, because it's close to the source of the movement, it's quite small. At the beginning of the wild goose, again, it's quite small, but as we feel the expansion in the solar plexus, it expands out again, and then again quite small here. Here the elbows going out, but finally, as the hands go out, this lovely opening across our shoulders. Good. And then shake out. 1 foot forwards. Just let your weight slip into the front, but about 60%. Give yourself a moment to settle, and then back. And we start to get that same sense of a kind of compression and release. It's like if you do bounce up and down on a trampoline or something like that, you do actually feel the push come in just before you move. Or if you're in the sea, and not necessarily when it's rough, but when there's a bit of a swell, you kind of feel it building underneath you before it lifts you up. So that encourages two things. One is to get a sense for how the movement builds and moves you. You don't have to think, well, now it's time to go forwards, and you certainly don't have to strain. The other is that it encourages to settle in, a quietening. You're not in a hurry, you're waiting for the push. And we have this saying in Tai Chi, seeking the stillness within the movement. Remember, these are always exercises as much for our minds, if you like, as for the physical body, in terms of the awareness that we bring to the movement. That quality of stillness is incredibly beneficial to us. And also, as we settle, that's when we can begin to raise our toes and our heel. More the weight settling in, but notice my posture doesn't change in the upper body. I don't lean back or lean forward. That's very important. I want to maintain a posture that allows the weight to drop straight down into my foot. If I use my shoulders and I lean back, I'm already halfway to falling. So again, that moment of settling, that moment of stillness is actually crucial for our mobility and our stability. And eventually you learn to kind of carry it with you. But in an exercise like this, it's a really good opportunity to really focus on that for a moment, to kind of spotlight, to highlight that. And then stepping through. Ultimately, we want all of these ideas, all of these principles to become naturally part of how we move and to blend with each other. We always describe them as though they're separate, but they're not. Rooting down, aligning, the stillness, and so on and so forth. They're all part of the same overall movement. And then on the other side. But it's useful to focus on different things. And I sometimes liken this to being a bit like cooking. If you're going to cook something, you prepare the ingredients. And they're separate, you know, you've got onions and carrots and whatever else you've got, I don't know. And you kind of prepare the ingredients and then you put them in the pan. And as they cook, there's a kind of blending of flavors. Usually what you get, you know, you can still recognize the carrots as carrots and so on, but they've also sort of like softened and kind of, as I say, blended, crossed over with other things and so on and so forth. So sometimes it's useful just to look at the ingredients of Tai Chi so that we can combine them properly. And then raising your toes and your heel. We shouldn't really see that as either or. That blending process, that sense of the whole body in movement should really be, again, part of the background of the whole art. Once we get used to this, we're always aware of it. We might choose to focus in one direction or another, but never to the exclusion of everything else. And then stepping in. So people have at times asked me, am I in some kind of trance or something? The answer is absolutely not. We're not sort of like anywhere out there or in some kind of vision or something like that. It's very much grounded in the reality of the movements that we're making, and very much a kind of broad awareness, but with this sense of stillness and with this clarity and this ability to change the primary focus of our attention. And then stepping through. It's a bit like when you know, with your eyes, when you, particularly, perhaps not at the moment because you're looking at a screen, but if you're standing on the edge of a field or something like that, you have a sense of the whole field. That's what we call the peripheral vision, the corners of your eye. But you may be kind of focused on, you know, the cow in the corner or something like that. Change direction if you haven't done so. Okay, so right foot forwards. Let's start with fisherman castanet. And again, it's in that moment of settling in the foot that your hands swing past your hips. In fact, if anything, it's almost at the same time as the hips begin to be pushed back. Because you're facing forwards, your arms are swinging forwards and backwards. And then this time you sit back and you turn towards the front leg, and that changes the direction of your arms. You have the movement, wind blows the willows. And if it's comfortable, you can combine that with stepping. You may find that little bit of turning in your hips actually helps you with stepping. This is the connection from the center of your body down to your feet. Good. And then on the other side, fisherman cast a net. And wind blows the willows. And stepping. Good, and bring your feet down. Shake out. Moving quickly. So back to your chair. Once again, just give yourself a few moments to think about your posture, and again, thinking about that quality of settling, of stillness. Just referring back to your posture is always a good way to just touch that feeling in your mind. And I think this is one of the great things to carry with us, that, you know, I always remember my first teacher saying about the standing equivalent posture, but saying you find yourself standing like this in the supermarket queues. And first I thought, well, why would I, thinking, while I stand in this stance that is so obviously kind of like, you know, painful for my legs while I'm waiting to get served. But then one day I just realized that she wasn't, you know, there's a certain amount of that adjustment of your posture, but actually it's more about just that kind of quietening, that settling in. And it always feels to me like when we do this, we actually get better at it. We actually end up with a kind of pathway into that state that is a bit smoother. You know, it's a well-walked pathway if you practice it. Doesn't mean it's necessarily easy, but it's a more straightforward process just to find that kind of quieter moment. So emphasizing that with embrace triangle, return to mountain, closing movement, pushing your arms out. So we push out a little bit, but then we start to draw in. First of all, with the arms coming around, hips sinking down, drawing the shoulders down, shoulders drawing the hands in, and then everything just settling. So it's really, you know, the pull of gravity, which we push against here, but only until we feel that we would start to stiffen up if we went any further. And the rest of it is just, in a sense, following the movement of gravity downwards through our body. One more time. And rest. And open your eyes. Lovely. Thank you once again, everybody. So